She was a size 20 corporate auditor who had just lost her career. He was New York's most ruthless capo, a phantom in a bespoke suit. When he commanded, "Marry me tonight," her laughter echoed through the empty bar. Then he slid the 50-page contract across the mahogany table. The rain hitting the 50-foot crystal windows of the Baccarat Hotel bar mirrored the absolute collapse of Sadie Jenkins's life. At 29, Sadie was a senior forensic auditor at Deloitte, or at least she had been until 4 o'clock this afternoon. Now, she was just an unemployed woman nursing a $42 bourbon cocktail she couldn't afford, wearing a damp Lane Bryant trench coat that felt entirely too suffocating. Sadie was a heavy woman, taking up space in a city that violently worshipped the thin and the affluent. She was used to being invisible. She was the woman people asked to hold their purses at clubs, the brilliant mind hidden in the back office, while thinner, louder colleagues presented her financial models to the board. But being invisible had its perks. She saw things no one else thought she was looking at. That was how she had caught the $12 million discrepancy in the ledger of Aegis Global, one of Deloitte's most untouchable offshore clients. She had brought the anomaly directly to her managing partner, Arthur Pendleton, expecting a commendation. Instead, Arthur had gone pale, confiscated her company laptop, and had security escort her out of the Bloomberg Tower within 10 minutes. Fired. Blacklisted. Sadie took a slow, burning sip of her bourbon, staring at her reflection in the mirrored bar back. Her round face was pale, her dark curls frizzed from the humidity. "You're drinking Michter's 20-year-old bourbon, as if it's cheap tap water, Miss Jenkins." The voice was a low, resonant baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down Sadie's spine. She turned her head. The man sliding onto the plush velvet stool next to her did not belong in the modern world. He looked like an apex predator poured into a charcoal Brioni suit. He had sharp, aristocratic cheekbones, midnight dark eyes that absorbed the dim chandelier light, and a jawline that looked like it could cut glass. A platinum Patek Philippe Nautilus peeked from beneath his tailored cuff. He exuded an aura of such absolute, terrifying authority that the bartender immediately retreated to the far end of the counter. "Do I know you?" Sadie asked, her defensive instincts flaring. She shifted her weight, hyper-aware of how much of the stool she occupied compared to his lean, broad-shouldered frame. "Not personally, but I know you, Sadie," the man said smoothly. He signaled the bartender with a subtle flick of 2 fingers. "I know you prefer a venti flat, white at 7:15 every morning. I know your mother is in a memory care facility in White Plains that costs $8,000 a month. And I know Arthur Pendleton fired you exactly 4 hours and 12 minutes ago." Sadie's blood ran cold. The alcohol evaporated from her system. "Are you from Aegis Global? Did Arthur send you to intimidate me? Because I swear I haven't made copies of those ledgers. Arthur Pendleton is a dying man. He just doesn't know it yet," the stranger interrupted, his tone chillingly indifferent. He accepted a glass of neat whiskey from the trembling bartender. "I am not from Aegis Global, Sadie. I own Aegis Global, among other things." Sadie's breath hitched. She had dug deep enough into the shell corporations to see the rumors. Aegis wasn't just a hedge fund. It was the pristine, sterilized laundry machine for the Costa crime syndicate. "You're Lorenzo Costa," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. The capo, the undisputed head of the largest organized crime family on the eastern seaboard. A man whose enemies routinely vanished into the concrete foundations of Hudson Yards. "I am," Lorenzo agreed. He turned his body fully toward her. His gaze didn't flick away in disgust, nor did it hold the patronizing pity she usually received from men who looked like GQ cover models. He looked at her the way a general looks at a map. "And I have a proposition for you. Marry me tonight. For 3 agonizing seconds, Sadie just stared at him. And then a sound erupted from her chest. It started as a scoff and built into full, chest-heaving laughter. It was a loud, bitter, genuine laugh that echoed off the baccarat crystal. Lorenzo Costa did not blink. He just waited. "Oh, God," Sadie gasped, wiping a tear of hysteria from the corner of her eye. She pointed a trembling finger at her own chest. "Is this a dare? Did some of your mob buddies bet you $1 million you couldn't get the fat, unemployed auditor to the altar? Where are the cameras?" "There are no cameras," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping a dangerous octave. "And I do not make wagers I have already won. Men who look like you do not ask women who look like me to marry them, Mr. Costa, not unless there's a sick punchline." Sadie gripped her purse, suddenly furious. The humiliation burned hotter than the bourbon. "I'm a size 20. I shop at Torrid, not Prada. I spend my weekends doing jigsaw puzzles, not doing cocaine on yachts. So whatever this sick game is, I'm not playing." She slid off the stool, intending to walk out into the storm. Lorenzo didn't reach for her. He didn't have to. He simply reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a thick, legal-sized dossier, dropping it onto the mahogany bar with a heavy thud. "You aren't playing a game, Sadie. You are currently fighting for your life. Sit down and read." The absolute command in his voice bypassed her rational brain. Her knees felt weak. Reluctantly, Sadie sat back down. She pulled the dossier toward her and flipped open the heavy leather cover. The first page bore the unmistakable, embossed watermark of Skadden, Arps, Slate, Mager and Flom, one of the most ruthless corporate law firms in Manhattan. But it wasn't the letterhead that made Sadie's stomach drop. It was the document underneath it. It was a draft of a federal indictment from the Southern District of New York. United States versus Sadie Jenkins. Charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud a financial institution. "What is this?" she choked out, her eyes scanning the terrifying legal jargon. "Arthur Pendleton is a coward, but he is a resourceful one," Lorenzo murmured, sipping his whiskey. "When you found the $12 million missing from my accounts, Arthur panicked. He stole that money to cover his own disastrous cryptocurrency margins. But instead of confessing, he spent the last 4 hours doctoring the digital footprint. He used your login credentials, Sadie. He routed the funds through your terminal. The FBI is currently drafting the official warrant. By 8 a.m. tomorrow, they will raid your apartment in Astoria." Sadie felt the room spin. "I can prove it wasn't me. The metadata has been scrubbed by professionals far more expensive than you can afford," Lorenzo cut in smoothly. "You will go to Danbury Federal Prison for 20 years. Your mother's care facility will evict her within 30 days when your accounts are frozen. That is your reality, Sadie. Unless you turn to the next page." With trembling fingers, Sadie flipped the page. It was a promissory note, dated 3 years ago. The signature at the bottom was a messy, frantic scrawl that she recognized instantly. Her father's signature. Principal amount, $4,200,000. Creditor, the Costa Holding Group. "My father died of a heart attack 2 years ago," Sadie whispered, her vision blurring. She had known her father had gambling issues, but she thought it was just thousands, not millions. "Your father died owing my family over $4 million, Lorenzo corrected, leaning in. The scent of bergamot, expensive leather, and cold rain washed over her. "In my world, debt does not die with the debtor. It passes to the blood. But by all rights of the commission, I should have sold you to a human trafficking ring in Macau to recoup my losses. But I am a businessman, Sadie. And right now, I need something far more valuable than $4 million. Sadie looked up, meeting those bottomless dark eyes. You need a wife. I need a specific wife, Lorenzo corrected. I am currently bidding on a multi-billion-dollar casino and resort contract in Atlantic City. It is my family's ticket to complete legitimacy. To win it, I have to pass the New Jersey Gaming Commission's microscopic vetting process. I cannot have a cartel princess on my arm. I cannot have a vapid, cocaine-addicted supermodel. The commission needs to see stability. They need to see a man grounded by a respectable, intelligent, completely unblemished civilian, and you chose the fat, invisible accountant. Sadie realized, the puzzle pieces clicking together in her brilliant, analytical mind. You want me because I look harmless. The society wives in Manhattan are thin, vicious, and hungry for scandal. But a plus-size corporate auditor, no one would ever suspect a mafia capo would fake a marriage with someone who looks like me. They'll think it's real because it makes no logical sense as a PR stunt. Lorenzo's lips curved into a faint, dangerous ghost of a smile. It was the first time she had seen his expression shift. You are remarkably intelligent, Sadie. Yes, you are exactly what I need. Unassuming, overlooked, indispensable. He reached over and tapped the final document in the dossier. It was a marriage contract. Here are my terms, Lorenzo stated, his voice low and hypnotic. You marry me tonight. You move into my penthouse at 15 Central Park West. You will act as my devoted wife for public appearances, charity galas, and board meetings. You will wear my ring, and you will smile for the cameras. And in exchange, she rasped, in exchange your father's debt is erased. Completely. Your mother's medical bills will be paid in full for the rest of her life by a private trust. Furthermore, I will hand over Arthur Pendleton's real, unscrubbed hard drives to the FBI anonymously. Arthur will take the fall, and your name will never appear in a federal database. Sadie stared at the contract. The paper felt heavy, radioactive. And if I refuse? If you refuse, I get up and walk out of this bar. Tomorrow morning, you are arrested for embezzlement. And my associates will pay a visit to your mother's facility to collect what your father owes in blood. The threat was delivered so calmly, without a trace of malice, that it was utterly paralyzing. It was just a transaction to him. This is coercion, she whispered. This is salvation, Lorenzo countered. He pulled a sleek Mont Blanc fountain pen from his jacket and laid it atop the contract. The marriage will be legally binding. It will be a real union in the eyes of the law. But understand this, Sadie. If you try to run, if you try to go to the police, the protection dissolves. The FBI gets the doctored files, and you take the fall. Sadie looked from the pen to Lorenzo. Her entire life had been governed by rules, gap standards, tax codes, societal expectations that told her to shrink herself, to apologize for taking up space, to keep her head down. And what had playing by the rules gotten her, framed by her boss, drowning in her father's secret sins, and alone in a bar on a Tuesday? She picked up the Mont Blanc pen. It was heavy, perfectly balanced. Are there rules? She asked, her voice steadying. If she was going to sell her soul to the devil, she was going to negotiate. About my weight, because I'm not going on some extreme, mafia-funded Ozempic diet to fit into your world. If you want me for my optics, you get all of me. Lorenzo's dark eyes flashed with something akin to genuine respect. His gaze swept over her, not with disgust, but with a sudden, searing intensity that made Sadie's breath catch in her throat. You will not change a single thing about yourself, Mia Sposa, he said softly, the Italian slipping out like velvet. You will eat what you want. You will command my staff as you see fit. You will take up exactly as much space in my world as you desire. Now, Sign." Sadie Jenkins, the invisible auditor, pressed the nib to the paper. She signed her name with a sharp, aggressive flourish on the dotted line. "Done," she said, dropping the pen. Lorenzo closed the dossier. He stood up, towering over her, and extended an impeccably manicured hand. "Then come, Mrs. Costa. We have a judge waiting for us at the plaza. It is time to get married." The midnight ceremony in a private suite at the plaza was a blur of mahogany, cigar smoke, and the heavy weight of a 6-carat, emerald-cut Harry Winston diamond being slipped onto Sadie's trembling finger. The judge, an old man sweating profusely despite the air conditioning, didn't dare look Lorenzo Costa in the eye. When he pronounced them husband and wife, there was no kiss. There was only a curt nod from Lorenzo, a man sealing a multi-billion-dollar transaction. Life at 15 Central Park West was a masterclass in opulent isolation. Lorenzo's penthouse spanned 2 floors, a sprawling fortress of floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass, dark Italian marble, and security personnel who moved like silent phantoms. Her closet had been stocked overnight by personal shoppers, racks of custom Oscar de la Renta, Marina Rinaldi, and bespoke silk loungewear, all meticulously tailored to her size 20 frame. For the first week, they lived like polite strangers, sharing a luxury hotel. Lorenzo left before dawn for meetings in windowless rooms in Little Italy, and returned long after midnight. Sadie, restless and stripped of her 80-hour work weeks, found herself adrift. She spent hours visiting her mother in White Plains, arriving in a chauffeured Maybach with 2 armed guards, reveling in the fact that the facility's director now treated her like royalty. But Sadie Jenkins was not built for a life of idle luxury. She was a forensic auditor. Her brain craved data, anomalies, the thrill of untangling a financial knot. On the 8th night, the silence of their arrangement shattered. It was the evening of the Robin Hood Foundation benefit at the Javits Center, a massive charity gala crawling with Manhattan's elite, politicians, and the New Jersey Gaming Commission officials Lorenzo needed to woo. Sadie wore a custom, deep emerald velvet gown that hugged her curves and pooled at her feet, her dark hair swept up in an intricate twist. When she descended the glass staircase of the penthouse, Lorenzo was waiting in the foyer, adjusting his Tom Ford bow tie. He stopped, his dark eyes locked onto her, tracing the line of her throat, the swell of her hips, the unapologetic presence she commanded. "You look..." Lorenzo paused, the gravel in his voice thickening. "Formidable, Mrs. Costa." "I look like a woman who is about to earn her keep," Sadie replied, her chin tilting up. The gala was a viper's nest of flashing cameras and whispered judgments. When Lorenzo guided her by the small of her back into the grand ballroom, the silence was palpable. The society wives, a sea of size 2 women subsisting on kale and Pilates, stared at Sadie with thinly veiled shock. Sadie kept her shoulders back, channeling the cold authority of her husband. But the real threat wasn't the civilians. It was Lorenzo's inner circle. Halfway through the evening, while Lorenzo was cornered by a state senator, a woman approached Sadie's table. It was Camilla Costa, Lorenzo's cousin, a razor-thin, terrifyingly elegant woman draped in Chanel who ran the family's underground gambling rings. "So you're the accountant," Camilla purred, her eyes raking over Sadie's body with absolute disdain. "I told Lorenzo he was taking this civilian masquerade too far. I suppose it's a brilliant disguise. No one would ever suspect the capo of the Costa family would actually touch a woman who looks like she ate his last 3 mistresses." A few of the surrounding mob wives tittered behind their champagne flutes. Sadie felt a familiar, hot sting of humiliation prick her eyes. Her entire life, she had been the punchline. But she wasn't Sadie Jenkins anymore. She was Sadie Costa, and she was holding a multi-million-dollar trump card. Sadie set her crystal glass down on the tablecloth. She didn't shrink. She leaned in, letting her physical presence dominate the space between them. "Camilla, isn't it?" Sadie asked, her voice calm and carrying perfectly over the string quartet. "I've been reviewing the family's offshore holdings to cure my boredom." Fascinating reading. Specifically, the discrepancies in the Cayman shell companies routing profits from your Staten Island tables. You're skimming 8% off the top, misclassifying it as equipment depreciation, a rookie layering technique. If I were you, I'd worry less about my waistline and more about what happens when Lorenzo finds out you've stolen $3 million from him in the last fiscal year. Camilla's perfectly contoured face drained of all color. The smug smile vanished, replaced by stark, naked terror. Before Camilla could stammer a reply, a heavy, warm hand settled onto Sadie's bare shoulder. Lorenzo had returned. The air temperature in their radius seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Is there a problem here, Camilla?" Lorenzo asked, his voice soft and lethal. No, Lorenzo," Camilla choked out, taking a panicked step back. "We were just admiring your wife's dress." "Leave," Lorenzo commanded. Camilla practically fled the ballroom. Lorenzo looked down at Sadie, his thumb lightly stroking the bare skin of her shoulder. "Did she insult you?" "She tried," Sadie said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "She failed. But we need to talk about your ledgers, Lorenzo. Your organization is bleeding, and it isn't just your cousin." A slow, feral smile spread across the capo's face. "I think, Umia Mowgli, it is time I showed you the real books." By their second month of marriage, the dynamic in the penthouse had entirely shifted. Sadie was no longer just a prop for the New Jersey Gaming Commission. She was the architect of Lorenzo's financial empire. Lorenzo had given her unrestricted access to the Costa family's private servers. Every night, after the staff had gone to sleep, they sat together at the massive oak dining table, surrounded by stacks of encrypted drives and financial reports. They drank expensive Barolo, and Sadie did what she did best. She hunted. She discovered that Camilla's skimming was just a symptom of a much larger disease. Someone high up in the Costa organization was feeding financial vulnerabilities to the Falcone family, the Costa's blood rivals in Brooklyn. The mole was using complex cryptocurrency, tumbling to hide the payoffs. "Look at these timestamps," Sadie said, one rainy Thursday night at 2:00 a.m., pointing a pen at her glowing iPad screen. She was wearing silk pajamas, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Every time a payment is routed to this anonymous blockchain wallet, it happens exactly 12 minutes after your weekly capos meeting in the Bronx concludes. The IP address pings off a cell tower in Tribeca." "Who lives in Tribeca, Lorenzo?" Lorenzo stared at the screen, a muscle ticking in his jaw. His eyes were cold, hollow voids. "Matteo. Matteo was his underboss, his right-hand man for 15 years. "Are you absolutely certain, Sadie?" Lorenzo asked quietly. "I tracked the blockchain ledger back to a fiat off-ramp, tied to a shell company registered in Delaware," Sadie explained, pulling up the incorporation documents. "The managing director of that shell is listed as M. Vitiello, Matteo's mother's maiden name." "I'm positive." Lorenzo didn't shout. He didn't break anything. He simply closed the iPad, walked around the table, and pulled Sadie to her feet. He framed her face with his large, calloused hands, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. "You just saved my life, Sadie," he murmured, the raw intensity in his gaze making her breath hitch. "The Falcones were using that financial data to squeeze my union contacts. If Matteo had continued, they would have had enough leverage to start a war we couldn't win." "What are you going to do?" she whispered. "What I must," Lorenzo said. He leaned down, pressing his lips to her forehead, a lingering, branding kiss that sent heat pooling in her stomach. "Stay in the penthouse tomorrow. Do not let anyone in unless they are my personal guard. The next 24 hours were agonizing. Sadie paced the length of the Central Park West penthouse, her anxiety spiking with every passing hour. She watched the news, waiting for reports of violence. At 6 p.m., her phone buzzed with an alert from the New York Times. Breaking. Senior partner at Deloitte. Arrested in massive offshore embezzlement ring. Arthur Pendleton had been raided by the FBI at dawn. The unscrubbed hard drives Lorenzo promised had been delivered. Arthur was going away for a very, very long time. Sadie was entirely safe. At 9 p.m., the penthouse doors finally opened. Lorenzo walked in. He looked exhausted, his tie discarded. A few faint drops of what looked like engine oil, or blood, splattered on the cuffs of his white shirt. He didn't go to the bar. He went straight to Sadie, sinking onto the velvet sofa beside her, and resting his head heavily against her shoulder. It was a gesture of absolute vulnerability from a man who was feared by thousands. "It's done," Lorenzo said, his voice ragged. "Matteo will no longer be a problem. The Falcones have been severely disciplined for their overreach." Sadie didn't ask for details. She just wrapped her arm around his broad shoulders, pulling him closer. He let out a long breath, burying his face in the crook of her neck. "The Gaming Commission called my lawyers an hour ago," Lorenzo added, his breath warm against her skin. "The Atlantic City casino bid was approved. We won, Sadie. We are fully legitimate." "Oui," she echoed softly. Lorenzo lifted his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The barrier of their business arrangement was entirely gone, replaced by a burning, undeniable hunger. "Yes, we," he said fiercely. "I bought a wife to save my empire. I didn't know I was marrying the only woman who could truly rule it beside me." He reached out, his hand sliding into her thick, dark hair. "You asked me in the Baccarat bar if there were rules about your size. I told you that you would take up exactly as much space in my world as you desired. But that was a lie." Sadie's heart skipped a beat. "A lie?" "Yes," Lorenzo whispered, his lips brushing against hers, sending an electric shock straight to her core. "Because you do not just take up space in my world, Sadie. You are my world. Every inch of you. Every brilliant, beautiful, terrifying piece of you belongs to me, just as I belong to you. And this contract..." He reached into his jacket, pulled out the folded marriage contract they had signed a month ago, and tossed it into the roaring fireplace. The flames devoured the paper in seconds. "There is no contract," the capo vowed, his mouth finally claiming hers with a desperate, crushing passion that tasted of whiskey and forever. "There is only my wife." Sadie kissed him back, pulling him down, surrendering to the heavy, thrilling reality of her new life. She was no longer the invisible auditor. She was the queen of the Costa Empire, and she had never felt more powerful. If you loved this thrilling mafia romance, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more audio stories. Tell us in the comments what you think Sadie should do next with her new mafia empire. Don't forget to share this video with your friends who love drama, plot twists, and powerful plus-size heroines taking charge.